Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm Governor Kate Brown, and we're here to give a fire press briefing on the situation in fire in the state of Oregon. I'm fortunate to be joined by a number of experts, including the Oregon Department of Forestry Fire Chief Doug Graff, Oregon State Fire Marshal Mariana Ruiz Temple, Major General Michael Stenzel of the Oregon National Guard, and from the Oregon Office of Emergency Management, Director Andrew Phelps, as well as Gabriella Goldfarb. She is the Environmental Public Health Manager at the Oregon Health Authority. It's mid-July, and already nearly 450,000 acres have burned across the state. We currently have 9 large fires burning in Oregon, including the country's largest with the Bootleg Fire. Right now, this is the 4th largest fire to burn in Oregon since 1900. And the weather conditions, windy and dry with lightning, are truly problematic. It's shaping up to be another difficult wildfire season. And unfortunately, we're responding to new fires as we're still recovering from last year's devastating fire season. The good news is there's still a lot of excellent work happening on the ground to protect Oregonians, our homes, and our land. We have more than 2,000 personnel working on the Bootleg Fire alone. Our heroic firefighters, logistical experts, communications, and operations professionals. Federal resources have been called in, and teams from Utah and California are partnering with us in this fight. After last year, what is very clear is that no corner of our state is immune to fire. On the West Coast and here in Oregon, the urgent and dangerous climate crisis has exacerbated conditions on the ground. We're seeing extensive drought conditions across the state, with 19 counties in drought emergencies, unprecedented heat waves, and fire seasons that are arriving earlier, coming on faster, and lasting for longer. We must be prepared, each and every one of us. Last year's historic fire season taught us that being prepared can truly be the difference between life and death. Being prepared is also one of the best ways you can help our frontline firefighters do their jobs. So if you take anything away from today, let it be this. Make a plan with your family. Sign up for local alerts at oralert.gov so you're aware of fires in your community. Please stay informed. You can visit wildfire.oregon.gov for helpful information. Get 2 weeks ready. And when you're asked to evacuate, please just do it. Listen to the experts I've invited here today. They will have some very helpful tips to keep you and your family safe. Also, remember this, as many as 80% of fires in Oregon are human caused. 80%. We can prevent so much tragic loss by being careful and fire-wise. Before I turn it over to the experts to give an overview of what they're seeing on the ground, I wanted to take a moment this morning to thank our National Guard's men and women for all they have done throughout the pandemic to help Oregonians and for standing ready to help on the wildfire front. Thank you to the generous employers who enable our National Guard members to serve. We are so incredibly grateful. Over to you, Chief Graff.
Thank you, Governor Brown. Doug Graff here, Chief of Fire Protection, Department of Forestry. And both myself and Mariana Ruiz Temple, State Fire Marshal, will give an overall briefing of the state relative to wildfire. Now we'll start with current weather update and how we got to this point in time, what we think is coming in the near future. And then we'll walk from east to west and highlight a few of the major fires currently on the landscape. First of all, I would emphasize the drought conditions across Oregon are really driving the fire potential. When we looked at the map this morning, 90% of the state is either in exceptional, extreme, or severe drought conditions. And I have not seen that in the past. 100% of the state is in some level of drought conditions. But to see that level and that severe and above really is the foundation of why we're at the condition we're at today. The other factor that came into play was the heat dome. You all may recall late June, 26 to 28, 100 plus degrees, and a good portion of the state really propelled us into late August fire conditions, maybe a month and a half sooner than what we're typically seeing the dry fuel conditions on the landscape we're facing today. When you add trigger points like lightning, and then as the governor mentioned, human-caused fires, we have fires on the landscape. The future for us for the remainder of the season continues to look above normal dry and above normal temperatures. So this is not going to return to normal anytime soon. So we're facing a long, difficult fire season. To provide you some context, specifically for ODF protected lands, 16 million acres of protection, the majority of private lands that we protect in and around our communities. We have 580 fires to date, 171,000 acres burned. That's 17 times our 10-year average for acres burned on ODF protected lands alone. Our 10-year average is 390 fires for 9,900 acres burned. Statewide, as the governor mentioned, close to 500,000. When you look at federal ground, the tribal ground, and the grazing lands in Southeast Oregon and wheat country, close to 500,000 burned acres already at close to 1,000 fires to date. So let's talk about the fires, and we'll start in Eastern Oregon. Bootleg Fire, of course, the largest in the nation, 387,000 acres, 30% contained. This fire has been on the landscape since the 6th of this month, and absolutely challenging conditions for us. We are getting more confident with the west side of that fire. Lines are established, mopping up, taking the heat out of the containment lines on the west side. The east side remains problematic, and that's where we would expect. It's possible to see another 50, 100,000 acres to the east. That fire has been stepping up on us and just been resistant to suppression activity given those dry fuels. I'll turn to Mariana, the State Fire Marshal, on any details relative to structural protection.
Thank you, Chief Graff. The Office of State Fire Marshal is currently in unified command on the Bootleg Fire. Good summary of where we are to date. I would like to maybe talk specifically to the impacts to structures and communities. The Office of State Fire Marshal Green team has been unified. Our primary mission to date is working to help with our wildland partners to help secure those lines and contain this fire in and around communities and structures. The southeast side, we've done some significant work there. We are starting to feel more comfortable with that side. As you indicated, the east side continues to be problematic as it bumps up on the winter rim. I wanted to let folks know that are in and around this community that there is a significant focus in protecting structures to Summer Lake, Silver Lake, and Paisley areas. We have structural resources, wildland resources, and a significant amount of preparation, structural prep and planning have been done. I want to thank the local landowners and the High Desert Rangeland Fire Protection Association for their partnership. Significant investment in time and preparation should we see fire along the rim. So in terms of the unified command, I also want to thank the community. This fire has been impacting them for well over 2 weeks. This fire continues to push and push well over about 70 miles. And today seems like the first day that we're able to feel a little bit more secure in the areas that we had concern with over the last 48 hours. So unified command, we continue to be under unified command until we feel the threat to structures and communities have been diminished. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Mariana. And I'd offer a little more context on that fire for the scope and scale. Last year, the Lion's Head fire, the largest fire on the landscape, burned 204,000 acres. and we're close to doubling that on this one fire alone. Beachy Creek was 193,000 and Riverside was 138,000. Those were large fires sitting at 387,000 acres. This is a huge fire in Oregon's history. Moving forward, a few thoughts on a couple of the other larger fires across the landscape that we think is important to share today. The Elbow Creek fire started on the 15th, 11,000, that's about 16,000 acres, 15% contained. Speaking with the incident command this morning, they're feeling a little bit more confident. Another 48 hours will be our turning point. We've got winds this afternoon and the following day. Today we're experiencing some more potential lightning, which may cause initial attack stress in that region. But hearing from the incident command, they think they're in a good position. We need a few more resources up in that region, and we're pushing them that way as best we can today. They've got to drop down into the River Canyon. It's about a 2,000-foot drop to tie in lines on that south side. We'll get a little bit more confidence on that as we do that work. I'd highlight the Grandview fire. This fire, North of Sisters, now is at 72% and 6,000 acres. That's going to be turned over to the local district this Thursday. So great support locally on containment efforts on that fire. I feel real confident that turns back to the district and we can get that large fire off the map. A lot of threat on that fire, and that's significant acres in that region. Mariana, any additional thoughts on that fire?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. This is actually a success story that I'd like to highlight. The significant threat to communities there was pretty significant. I want to thank the local responders. We were under unified command, and this is just a good time to highlight that during this last legislative session, there was a significant investment in capacity into the Oregon Department of Forestry and the Office of State Fire Marshal. And one critical strategy that we were able to use in this fire was what we're calling immediate response. It allows us to surge local resources during local initial attack in the hopes of keeping fires small and away from communities. And I believe that that investment, along with the local mutual aid, local Oregon Department of Forestry, and our federal partners, really was instrumental in keeping this fire small. This fire started when we had other significant fire on the landscape. And if this fire would have grown, we would have seen a severe drawdown of resources. So I want to just highlight that investment, that critical investment this last legislative session, and the immediate response component, which is a new strategy that we're implementing this year.
Thank you, Mariana. We'll close with two other fires to highlight and move into the west side of the Cascades. Another fire here in the Santiam Canyon, so really wanted to emphasize the status of this. Certainly the history we have in that canyon from last year is the Brula fire at 156 acres. This is on Forest Service ground. Incident management team, interagency team is managing that. 10% contained. I think the important thing to note here is we have about 50% of that fire direct line up against the fire, and that's a positive situation. They're going to continue to put effort there to try to get that direct line around the entire fire. Steep, difficult country, like we've seen in that region. Many challenges. Had a rock roll the other day, hit a firefighter on the helmet. That's what those save lives. So it's tough to get firefighters in that region, but they're focusing their energy on containing that fire. But I think that one's going to be difficult and on the landscape for some time. And finally, the Jack fire on the Umpqua at 18,000 acres, 55% contained. There's some burnout operations to be done and tightening of lines there, but feel really comfortable that we're moving in the right direction to close out that fire. But again, because it's in the heavier timber as we move to that west side of the Cascades, going to be on the landscape for some time. And with that, that would close my end, the operational briefing, with just a thanks to the governor's office and the legislature for those investments that Mariana highlighted. You have placed us in a position to be as successful as possible moving into these challenging fire conditions that we're experiencing in 2021. So many, many thanks.
Thank you, Doug. And just in closing, I wanted to provide a sense of where we are this fire season. I would categorize this fire season thus far as historic in terms of the amount of resources we've deployed, how many times we've deployed within a 3-week period. We've mobilized to 6 conflagrations, and this is the earliest and most significant mobilization to date. I can't stress enough how important it is that all of us Oregonians, whether we're recreating or at home, be fire aware and know your fire restrictions. As we reflect on the fire preparation this fire season, we knew that this was going to be a problematic season just given the amount of fire we saw early in the season. And I want to highlight for all the 3 critical strategies that we have implemented this fire season. Under the State Fire Marshal, we are calling it Response Ready Oregon. And through those investments in the January e-board and the past wildfire legislation, we're implementing pre-positioning of resources. This is to keep fires small and away from communities. We've done that in the last month in 4 key areas around the state. In 2 of those areas, we've seen their investment, that return on investment in terms of using them in IA and keeping fires small. We also, in partnership with the Oregon Department of Forestry, have access to air resources, again, helping in conflagrations or before conflagrations and keeping fires small. The Oregon Department of Forestry was able to invest in 2 seats that were able to place in the gorge area. That investment saved a significant amount of acreage and loss of property in the early Wasco conflagrations. And third, the work of the governor's office and the Office of Emergency Management to lean forward on a governor's executive order early on, allowing us to bring resources in from other states was key and critical as we saw severe drawdown early in July. Those 3 investments, those 3 actions is helping to reduce fires. We're going to continue to use those strategies throughout the fire season. And I want to thank all of our partners on this call for helping to support communities in this time of need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fire Marshal Ruiz Temple. Thanks for joining us from the Bootleg Fire, and Chief Graff, thanks for joining us from Salem. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the Adjutant General, Mike Stensel.
Thank you, Governor. I'd like to just thank you for the compliment you sent to your guard men and women in your opening remarks, as well as the employers standing behind them. Without their support, as you know, we wouldn't be able to provide all this effort to the country. We're a small part of this, but we're awful proud to be part of this team. So as of today, we have approximately 85 Oregon National Guard members assisting with firefighting support. We've traditionally provided that support in 3 areas: traffic assistance points, aviation support, and ground firefighting teams. So I'll briefly walk through each one of those. Right now, we've got approximately 62 of those service members supporting 17 traffic assistance points for the Bootleg Fire in both Klamath and Lake counties. In terms of aviation support, we've got 2 Black Hawk helicopters outfitted with water buckets in support of the Bootleg Fire. And we've got 1 Black Hawk at the Klamath Falls Airport that's providing medevac support as well as some search and rescue capabilities. We also have 1 UH-72 Lakota helicopter that's flying out of Lake County Airport providing fire spotting assistance for ODF. As of the 18th, I was told we dropped more than 25,000 gallons of water and already assisted in 2 search and rescue missions down in that area. Lastly, we also have 3 teams of 125 person each, Red Car certified and trained personnel standing by at the request of ODF for ground wildfire. With that, again, I'll just reiterate that we're proud to be part of that team and our ability to contribute to this effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you joining us today. Next up, we have the Director of the Office of Emergency Management, Andrew Phelps. Director Phelps, take it away.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Andrew Phelps. I'm the Director of the Oregon Office of Emergency Management. As you've heard from our partners at the Department of Forestry and the State Fire Marshal's Office, conditions out here across the state are extreme. The severe drought and hot weather and dry weather is forecasted for the foreseeable future. So it's important to do things now based on these current conditions and their impacts, and to understand that these are indicators, not outliers, of what we can expect in the future. And just as our firefighters continue to adapt their response to changing conditions, we must adapt how we prepare as individuals in Oregon for what's next. It can seem overwhelming. We've been through a lot this year. Even as we recover from last year's wildfires, it's important to remember that there are things we all can do within our communities to be prepared. These are things not only that we can do, but that we need to do to ensure we're ready for what's next. First and foremost, stay informed. I encourage all Oregonians to sign up for emergency alerts with your local county. We've implemented the Or Alert system statewide. 26 counties are currently offering alerts through this system. 8 counties are in process, and 2 counties had existing systems before Or Alert to allow folks to get notification through their counties. Know and understand the evacuation levels. I want to stress the importance of not only knowing the current levels and what they mean, but above all, empower Oregonians to make decisions to protect yourselves and your families. If you feel unsafe, don't wait for a notification or a knock on the door or any other alert. Evacuate. Get yourself to safety. Here in Oregon, we follow a 3-level evacuation system, and it's built on the understanding that you have taken the necessary steps beforehand to prepare your family. You have a plan on how you're going to evacuate your home and your neighborhood. You've got an emergency kit with the necessary supplies, including food, water, medication, and copies of important documents to prepare yourself. And you know the evacuation routes in your community. For a level 1 evacuation notice, this means be ready. Be prepared to evacuate. Review and update the contents of your emergency plan and kit. Talk to your community, your neighbors, your family who may be out of state, and let them know what your plan is should you have to evacuate your phone. And make sure that you've signed up for those evacuation alerts from your county. Level 2 means be set. This means conditions can change very rapidly, and this may be the only notice you receive. It is time to act and begin implementing your emergency plan. Relocate to a safe place outside of the affected area if you feel a wildfire threat is significant in your area. And let loved ones know if you've evacuated, where you are, and that you're safe. Once you reach a level 3 evacuation, that means go now. The time to prepare is over. The priority now becomes life safety. Don't stop to gather belongings or make efforts to protect your home. Get you and your family to safety. The firefighters and first responders that have worked to protect lives and property in your community depend on you taking that action. All of this information and more is available on the state's wildfire website, wildfire.oregon.gov. I want to close just by reiterating that we've been through a lot and we've learned a lot. I urge each and every Oregonian to take steps today to prepare for whatever bad day lies ahead. Thank you.
Director Phelps, we really appreciate your service. And next up, I'm going to turn it over to the Oregon Health Authority's Gabriela Goldfarb. Gabriela.
Thank you, Governor. Good morning. I am Gabriela Goldfarb. I manage the Environmental Public Health section in the Oregon Health Authority. OHA really appreciates the opportunity to give you all information about risks to health this wildfire season with a focus on smoke impacts, as well as actions people can take to protect themselves from smoke, and what we are seeing so far as we monitor emergency departments and urgent care centers for signs of wildfire and smoke impacts. So people are still really feeling the trauma of the 2020 wildfires and the deadly and oppressive heat dome across the state last month, as we already find ourselves in an early and very challenging fire season, as my colleagues have laid out. This all aligns with climate predictions for more frequent and severe fire and extreme weather, and it means increased risk to our health. Fortunately, there's one way we are better off this fire season compared to last, in that many folks are vaccinated against COVID. We know that exposure to smoke and other forms of air pollution can increase the risk of contracting infectious respiratory diseases like COVID, can increase the severity of those infections, and it can worsen underlying chronic respiratory conditions. We are always concerned about smoke exposure for people with heart or lung disease, older adults, children, pregnant people, communities of color, people living in poverty, and houseless people. All of these groups are at higher risk of harmful health effects from wildfire smoke exposures. We have seen great coverage in the media already about ways people can protect themselves, so thank you, and please keep it up. Urge your readers and listeners to plan ahead by making sure they have their medications, that they purchase air filtration devices or filters for their indoor HVAC systems, or they can even make their own DIY air cleaner with a box fan and filter. And we have all of this information and more on the Oregon Health Authority website, healthoregon.org/wildfires. Finally, make arrangements ahead of time to stay with family or friends in another part of the state as a backup plan if the smoke gets too bad. If you find yourself in a place with high smoke levels, stay inside if possible with windows and doors closed. Avoid vacuuming, burning candles, doing other activities that increase indoor air pollution. Operate that HVAC system or air filtration device to make a cleaner airspace in your home, and avoid strenuous outdoor activity. Keep in mind that smoke particles are really small, and bandanas and similar cloth masks aren't effective to protect your lungs. We know that N95 or P100 respirators that are approved by NIOSH may offer protection when they are properly fitted and worn. They won't work for everyone though, especially children, and people with heart or lung conditions need to check with their healthcare provider before wearing a respirator. Again, people can get more information about protecting their health from smoke at healthoregon.org/wildfires. Since early July, OHA has been monitoring emergency departments and urgent care centers in smoke-impacted areas for reports of people experiencing asthma-like illnesses or other respiratory complaints, as well as mention of wildfire, smoke, or disaster. So far, we aren't seeing signals of immediate significant smoke impacts to health, the way we did with last year's Labor Day fires, but it's early in the season and we will keep monitoring. Yesterday, DEQ extended an air quality advisory at least through tomorrow for Lake and Harney counties and Eastern Klamath County, and issued a new advisory for Baker, Union, and Wallowa counties. We're seeing smoke from the Bootleg Fire impact all these areas, with additional smoke in Northeast Oregon from local fires and in South Central Oregon starting to come in from California fires. DEQ consults with OHA and with other partners to set these advisories as soon as air quality becomes unhealthy for sensitive groups, which is the orange level on the air quality index. Smoke levels can change rapidly, so people should check the Oregon Smoke Information blog or download the free Oregon Air app on your smartphone to stay informed, as you've heard all of my colleagues talk about. Stay informed, make a plan, and prepare ahead of time. That concludes my comments. I'll stop there and turn it back over to you, Governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriella. We appreciate that very helpful information. And with that, Liz, we're ready to take questions.
Great, thank you, Governor. We'll start questions with Katie Street at KOBI.
Thank you. So why are there so many more conflagrations being called this year in comparison to years past?
Thank you, Katie. I'll turn that question over to Chief Graff, but it's fair to say that the conditions on the ground are extremely concerning. We've had extremely hot weather. As you know, we have 19 counties that have drought declarations, so things are extremely dry, and so we've got very challenging conditions on the ground. Chief Graff.
Thank you, Governor Brown. That's a great assessment. I would turn to Mariana specifically on the conflagration for structural protection for that one. Mariana?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the governor said it well, is that we are seeing conditions that are creating fires to be more complex and on our landscapes longer. In terms of where those fires have been to date, they've been in and around communities. And that is, again, our number one priority is to keep those fires small. Those conflagrations early on were in Wasco County. We know historically what fires can do in Wasco County. Again, use some of those air resources and out-of-state resources to assist there. All the way down border to border, most of the conflagrations or all of the conflagrations have impacted communities and structures. So I would say nothing has changed in terms of how we've mobilized. The conditions are changing, which is driving our decisions on how we mobilize to conflagrations.
And Katie, I'll just close with, there's absolutely no question that climate change is playing out before our eyes. We saw the heat dome event a few weeks ago. We unfortunately lost a lot of Oregonians through that event. In February, we saw devastating ice storms. Over 500,000 people lost power. Last fall, as you are well aware, we had unprecedented wildfires. We had over 4,000 homes lost in that fire, and it is literally climate change playing out before our eyes. And that's why it's incredibly important that we continue to take the actions that Oregon is taking to tackle climate change, from reducing our reliance on fossil fuels to making sure that we transition to clean energy as quickly as possible. And that's what we are doing with the passage of House Bill 2021.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. We'll go next to Galen Etlin with KGW.
I appreciate it. You mentioned that higher risk of transmission of COVID-19 under wildfire smoke conditions. We know that Lake County has the state's lowest vaccination rate of 31% total population. Klamath County is also pretty low, 40%. What's being done to address that disparity during wildfires?
Thank you. Gabriella, do you want to talk about the work that the Oregon Health Authority is doing?
Yes, OHA has been partnering, and that's really going to be the name of the game now, with local community-based organizations, with healthcare providers, and our local public health authorities to make sure that everybody knows they can get a vaccine and that their questions are answered for the people who have questions about vaccines, how to get information from a reputable source, somebody they trust, like their healthcare provider, pharmacist, other folks like that. So we know that we're going to have to be in this effort for the long haul, just as our colleagues here are going to have to persist on the fire front. And these are, again, two global pandemics that we're experiencing, and we're just going to have to keep working at it person by person.
Thank you, Gabriella.
Thanks, Galen. Next up is Lisa Balick with COIN.
Good morning. Governor, when it comes to state forest management practices, there's been criticism that the state hasn't done an adequate job of clearing undergrowth and brush and thinning forests. Does the state accept some of the blame for contributing to the current fire situation?
Well, Lisa, as you're well aware, I initiated my Wildfire Council a couple of years ago. The purpose of the council was to make recommendations, which include how can we ensure that our communities are better adapted to wildfire? Number two, how do we modernize and upgrade our firefighting efforts? As both Chief Ruiz Temple and Chief Graff mentioned, the conditions we're seeing are substantially different than we saw even 10 years ago. So these fires are substantially hotter, they're substantially faster, they're simply much more fierce than we have seen in earlier years. And the third piece is to ensure that we have healthier landscapes that are more wildfire resistant. So I have been requesting additional resources from the state legislature to do this work for the last couple of years. And I'm very, very pleased that I have been able to sign Senate Bill 762, which invests close to $200 million in this effort. I know it's not enough. There's obviously more investment that needs to be made. And that's why I'm so pleased, frankly, that the Biden-Harris administration is interested in developing a comprehensive collaborative strategy with the Western states to tackle wildfire. We cannot solve this problem alone. We need a strong federal partner, and the Biden-Harris administration is willing to step up to help us tackle the situation.
I guess, but isn't part of the problem, though, the forest management practices here in the state that we're not doing what needs to be done to reduce the fuels?
I've been very, very clear. We are working hard to increase our level of thinning and prescriptive burning so that we can create healthier landscapes. We do this in a number of ways. I'll turn it over to the Fire Chief Graff to have him talk about it. But one of the ways that we do this is through the Good Neighbor Authority. We literally partner with our federal agencies, U.S. Forest Service and BLM, to do that level of harvest and thinning and prescriptive burning. And it has to be done collaboratively, and it's extremely effective. We know by taking this collaborative approach, we can create jobs in our timber-dependent rural communities. We can provide product for the mills, and we can create healthier landscapes and either prevent or mitigate wildfire. We're absolutely invested on this approach. Chief Graff, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Governor Brown. I would. I think it's really important to recognize nationally in the last 5 to 10 years, we've really established the roadmap to the future relative to responding to wildfires, particularly in the West, and that's the national cohesive strategy. And as Governor Brown highlighted, there's 3 tenets of that strategy. What we typically invest in when it comes to wildfires response and being ready, because that's critically important. But to really change the dial and move forward to mitigate the catastrophic risk of wildfire that continues to increase in this reality that we're living, it's going to take the other 2 tenets, and that's fire adapted communities. So the investments in 762 to mitigate catastrophic risk around our communities with mitigation projects, thinnings, both into ODF and the State Fire Marshal's office will be in play. And then also resilient landscapes. And I think that's what we're really talking about. And that's the 3rd tenet of the cohesive strategy. And that's thinning and managing those forests to take the energy and potential out of that catastrophic risk. And really critically important, this is incorporating prescribed fire back into the system. Fire is a natural part of our environment, and being able to put prescribed fire in the spring and the fall where it's safe, reducing that fuel condition, we're really working towards that across all Western states. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Chief Graff.
Thanks, Lisa. We'll go next to Sarah Klein with the Associated Press.
Hi, my question's probably for Mariana or Doug. I know you both said that many resources and personnel have been mobilized and that firefighters have been brought in from outside of Oregon. But as the fire season continues, and assuming wildfires ignite in other states, are there concerns about resources becoming more limited? And also with the season occurring so early this year in the hot weather, are there also concerns about exhaustion?
Just so you know, I am obviously concerned about the impact of this year's wildfire season. And frankly, it comes at the same time that we may have a challenging hurricane season on the East Coast. So obviously this could be the perfect storm. I'm incredibly grateful to our hardworking, both structural and wildland firefighters that have been out on the landscape now for several weeks. And obviously our supporting partners, including our National Guards men and women. Right now we have roughly 5,000 folks out on the landscape. We do have some additional tools, including new aircraft to support these efforts. And I'll let Chief Graff and the Fire Marshal talk about more specifics.
Thank you, Governor. I think it's really key in the conversation is recognize that absolutely fire season is getting longer. March 28th, Bull Springs Fire north of Bend had 182 evacuations on that fire. In late March, the legislature and the governor's office acted in January following the 2020 fire season to prep for this year. And part of that package that was invested in the emergency board of January was to hire seasonal firefighters sooner. And that set us up for success. Also added aviation assets for ODF, and Mariana will speak to the State Fire Marshal on the structural side. The bottom line, there's a clear recognition that greater investments is necessary, and we've seen that action. Relative to, are we concerned? Absolutely. That's the cumulative fatigue on firefighters in this heat. Is definitely a concern for us. So greater capacity helps alleviate some of that. National system is there for support, but as the governor mentioned, we already have 5,000 firefighters mobilized into the state. At our peak last year, from the September events, we had 7,600 firefighters. So there's a little bit more in the national system. We still have contract crews, hand crews available, and when those are fully mobilized, that's when I'll turn to the National Guard and ask for additional crew resources to ensure that we have the resources needed. Mariana?
Thank you, Doug. I would echo what you said. I think that from a structural perspective, we are all what we call the part of the complete coordinated system. And what we know in Oregon is that in terms of structural protection and wildland, the amount of firefighters we have are not commensurate with the types and size of our fires. We do rely on that complete coordinated system within Oregon, but around the nation, and it requires a constant assessment and request for resources. It's going to take every layer of our response system to keep Oregonians safe this season. It means that the first line of defense is Oregonians practicing safely and keeping fire wise, as the governor said. 2, initial attack and making sure those resources are available for initial attack. 3, mutual aid, National Guard coming in to provide the extra needed capacity. And then 4, importing resources from out of state is key and critical as we have reduced capacity, as we saw last week was at a critical drawdown. So it takes every Oregonian, every firefighter, and every possible ability to bring in out of state resources, which we've been doing. That's a daily rhythm that all of our MAC members, our multi-agency coordination group, does daily. And then lastly, I just wanted to say thank you for the question on the health. In Oregon, we know we cannot take anything that's going to diminish any firefighter at this point off of any of our fires. And so we are ensuring that we are tracking and ensuring the safety of our firefighters, whether that's communicable diseases, whether that's Camp Crud, or whether that's the mental health of our firefighters. So we need every firefighter on deck this season. Thank you.
Thank you. And in closing that conversation, I just want to reiterate something that the fire marshal said, and that is, as I mentioned earlier, roughly 80% of fires in Oregon are human caused. So it's critically important that every Oregonian be fire wise and to be extremely careful. And in the event our national resources get thin, we are also able, fortunately, to call on international resources from our friends in Canada and Australia and other places. So it can be truly an international effort, and we're incredibly grateful for these folks that help us out during fire season.
Thank you, Sarah. We have time for 2 more questions. We're going to take a question next from Kevin Winter with the Lake County Examiner.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm going to focus on the Bootleg Fire here. What will need to be done to rebuild the area that got burned, especially the forests, the private landowners, and stuff like that? What needs to be done to rebuild that forest to where it's healthy again?
Thanks. I just have to say, from a governor's standpoint, I'm absolutely committed to making sure that the region, the communities get the tools and the resources they need to rebuild and recover. I'll let Chief Graff and the fire marshal speak to the specifics in terms of what's happening on the ground.
We continue to see from these fires really restoration work continuing from last year, and we know it's ahead of us this year. Private landowners will really be aggressive on replanting forests. We're losing a lot of natural resources in these large fires. So they're certainly taking action on that front. A lot of damage from slides that come across roads, so there's roads repairs. And these recoveries in our natural resources take years. So it's a long-term investment. Mariana?
Thank you. Just a note is that as folks come back into those areas, we would ask that they enter those safely. Some of those areas are still unsafe in terms of snags and trees. In terms of long-term recovery, the Office of Emergency Management has really great tools as they're continuing to help Oregonians with recovery in 2020. Just ensuring that as we look to maybe a fire season 2022, that landowners and property owners implement defensible space standards. Those can be found on probably the Office of Emergency Management's website and ours. And take a look at those areas in and around your home that may draw fire to your home. But in terms of recovery, the Office of Emergency Management has some great tools as they're continuing that effort from last season.
And Kevin, we know this is extremely stressful. My heart goes out to all the families and communities impacted. This is a really challenging wildfire season, and we really appreciate their willingness to listen to authorities and take active safety precautions.
Thanks, Kevin. We're a little over time, but we're going to take 1 more question from Gary Warner with EO Media.
Thanks. This is sort of along the same line because challenges don't come one at a time. The COVID Delta variant is coming up across the country. In Oregon today, we're seeing most of the counties are seeing an uptick in the amount of COVID. Some, like Umatilla, are very high. Since June 30th, the coordination of the public response has been moved out to the counties. Is there any thought about changing that, given that what we're seeing in places like Los Angeles, where it can come on very fast?
At this point in time, Gary, no. Obviously, should at a statewide level our hospital bed capacity be strained, we will have conversations about what steps we might need to take. But as you are well aware, we're moving to a more localized traditional approach. We're relying on our local public health authorities and their strong partners in the medical community and the healthcare community to help continue to get information and vaccination efforts out to community members, as well as to tackle the response to the virus. The Oregon Health Authority, at my direction, is making sure that these localized communities where we have extra challenges have the support and resources that they need to tackle current outbreaks. But again, the best tool we have to fighting this virus is through a shot in the arm, through a vaccination. And I want to encourage, again, every Oregonian who's eligible and available for a vaccine to get one. That is the most effective tool that you have to protect yourself and your family members and to prevent hospitalizations and deaths.
You touched on this a little bit with the OHA comment, but 20 days into the new policy since June 30th, are you satisfied that it's working out?
I'm certainly concerned because what we know is that the Delta variant is substantially more transmissible. Oregonians are well versed in the ways to protect themselves and their family members. We have strong recommendations for mask guidelines for particularly children under 12 and for folks who are not vaccinated. I certainly encourage folks to be very familiar with those guidelines and comply with those recommendations.
Thank you.
Great. That's all the time we have for questions, Governor. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Thanks to all of our experts. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And to Oregonians, please stay safe out there.